You're too polite, Earth. That was the final sneer from the Varnak ambassador before the Council's vote began. No one realized humanity had been trained to stay polite, not because it was weak, but because it was protecting something. The Council chamber was a hollowed-out moon orbiting the neutral star of Indari Prime, a monument to diplomacy carved in obsidian, glittering with the power of over 1,000 worlds. It was where empires came to posture, to parley, and on occasion to prevent extinction. And today, it was full of eyes turned toward Earth. A subtle hush had fallen across the circular chamber as Dr. Elise Morgan took her place at the central podium. Her slate-gray uniform bore no insignia of war, only the single silver thread that marked her as Earth's high diplomat. Her voice, calm as a still lake, echoed beneath the high dome. "The delegation from Earth is present," she said. "We are prepared to address the charges levied against our border operations." The charges were ridiculous, fabrications at best, deliberate provocations at worst. Skirmishes at the rim had been initiated by rogue fleets from lesser species, trying to test humanity's defenses. But the truth rarely mattered at the Council anymore. Politics had long since overtaken principle. Ambassador Creel of the Varnak Confederacy, a species of sharp-spined quadrupeds with venom in both words and fangs, slithered forward with what could only be described as smug delight. He tapped his claws on the speaker node, amplifying his voice across the chamber. "Earth has long hidden behind its pleasantries," he hissed. "Your smiles are masks, your gifts are bribes, your peacekeepers are soldiers in disguise." Ripples of murmured agreement passed through the surrounding seats. Elise didn't flinch. Creel leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that still echoed thanks to the chamber's acoustics. "You're too polite, Earth. And the Council is tired of your performance." She studied him for a beat too, long. Her reply when it came was surgical. "Earth's restraint is not performance, it is policy, and policies can change." But the words barely registered. The Council had made up its mind. An ancient Olan judge, blind and grown into her coral throne over the course of 3 centuries, spoke the verdict with ceremonial gravity. Earth will submit all fleet logs, cede control of disputed sectors, and disband its outer patrols pending further review. There was no deliberation, no negotiation. The sentence had been decided before the humans ever entered the chamber. Elise bowed her head, not in submission but acknowledgement. Then she turned from the podium without another word. Aide Commander Rafi Chen fell in step beside her as they moved down the corridor of polished black stone, past the silver murals depicting past triumphs of diplomacy. His jaw was set. "They already wrote the outcome before we arrived," he muttered. "They always do," she replied quietly. The silence stretched as they walked. Finally, Chen spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, do we notify command?" Elise stopped at the entrance to Earth's delegation quarters and turned to him. Her eyes, always warm before, had gone still. Cold. Professional. "We'll follow protocol," she said. Chen hesitated. "Black protocol?" A pause. Then she nodded. "Yes, it's time." She stepped through the doorway and disappeared into the shadows of the chamber. In the depths of Earth's diplomatic starship Orpheus, signal buoys activated. Data bursts shot silently into deep space through encrypted quantum channels. On Earth, in a secure subterranean vault beneath the United Nations Defense Complex, 3 red lights blinked in unison for the first time in 70 years. From Mars to the Kuiper Belt, across outposts and orbital rings, humanity's long-dormant sentinels awakened, and the galaxy would soon learn Earth hadn't been polite because it lacked power. Earth had been polite because it was giving the galaxy one long, merciful chance. Now that mercy was on a countdown. He kneeled, hands raised in peace. The Gaurak guard shot him in the head anyway. Billions watched the blood pool beneath Earth's envoy. No one laughed for long. The air in the council plaza shimmered faintly with heat and ceremony. Dozens of alien delegates stood beneath the banners of unity, their colorful sigils fluttering in the synthetic breeze. Today was meant to be a display of transparency. of fairness, of civilization at its most dignified. Instead, it became a funeral. The human peacekeeper, Lieutenant Aaron Hale, knelt in the center of the white-tiled square. No weapons, no armor. Just a diplomatic sash across his chest and his identification chip visible beneath transparent skin at the wrist. His hands were raised above his head, open palms showing complete submission. The broadcast drones circled slowly, capturing every angle. It was being streamed live across over 2,000 inhabited systems. "I am here in good faith," Hale said, voice steady. "I am here in accordance with Council protocol." The Galactic guard, hulking and insectoid, aimed his pulse rifle squarely at the back of Hale's head. He had no authority to act, no directive. It was meant to be intimidation, a spectacle. But something shifted in his stance, a ripple of arrogance, or boredom, or something darker. And then, without a word, he pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening even across the vacuum-shielded plaza. Hale collapsed instantly, a perfect red blossom spreading across the pale floor. The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. Delegates glanced around in disbelief. Some recoiled in shock. But others, Ambassador Creel among them, chuckled, quietly, almost smugly, as if humanity had just been taught a long overdue lesson. Inside the Earth delegation's observation room, Elise Morgan stood absolutely still. No reaction. No outburst. Only the faintest narrowing of her eyes. Her aide, Rafi Chen, took a step forward. "Ma'am," she raised a hand. "No, let them finish the feed." On the screen, the Galactic guard holstered his weapon and turned away. No arrest. No protest. No censure. The camera panned up to capture the glittering council spire. A symbol of unity, now soaked in human blood. Elise turned away from the screen. "Prepare the ship. We're leaving." Chen blinked. "But now." Across the council chamber, whispers bloomed into arguments. Murmurs turned to outrage, but not for the reason one might hope. Not for justice. Not for a murdered peacekeeper. No, the discussion was already shifting toward Earth's response. What would humanity do? Would they retaliate? Protest? Threaten? They didn't expect silence. When the council session resumed hours later, Elise Morgan's seat was empty. The entire Earth delegation, dozens of seasoned diplomats, aides, and analysts, had vanished, gone without notice, without ceremony, without a trace. And then the council's systems flickered. Not their communication systems, not the outer defenses, their archives, historical logs, meeting records, private ambassadorial files, all touched. Not deleted, but marked. A single human glyph embedded across key files like a watermark. D-Black protocol engaged. A few of the older delegates recognized the AO symbol. Most didn't. Those who did left the chamber. On the bridge of the Orpheus, now already beyond the council's tracking perimeter, Elise Morgan stood in front of the command table, arms crossed behind her back. "Open secure channel to Seoul High Command," she said. "Alpha tier. Encryption. Relay only." "Acknowledged," the AI replied. Chen approached quietly. "We're being hailed. Multiple systems. Demands for explanation." "Do not answer," she replied coldly. "Let them sit in silence." He hesitated. "Ma'am, Aaron Hale." "I know." Her voice cracked just slightly, the only crack in the surface. "He was our last message." She continued. "They saw it, and they chose blood over dignity." Chen nodded slowly. "So we give them what comes after dignity." "No," she said, turning to face him. "We give them what comes after patience." In the farthest sectors of Earth's influence, old warning buoys blinked awake. In dry dock facilities buried inside moons, ships without names began power-up sequences. They weren't warships. They were reminders, built for moments when words failed and silence became humanity's final language. And across the galaxy, billions replayed the footage. A human kneeling, unarmed, unafraid, shot for the crime of being calm. Some laughed, some whispered, but a few understood. That wasn't the end. That was the switch. No declarations, no threats, no calls for justice, just silence. And in that silence, the galaxy began to understand. Earth wasn't retreating. Earth was preparing. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council's primary communication grid experienced a blackout, selective, precise, surgical, not total silence. Only Earth went dark, no signals from its embassies, no transmissions from Sol, no diplomatic couriers. Nothing from Mars, Titan, Europa, or the deep-range outposts. Every channel tied to the human sphere returned the same automated message. This node is undergoing containment recalibration. Stand by. Which, of course, was a lie. A highly specific one. Ambassador Creel, seated in his now sterile Varnic embassy suite, reviewed the phrase over and over. Even his aides could sense the twitch in his tail. This isn't normal, one of them muttered. Creel clicked his mandibles. Of course it isn't normal. It's calculated. He stood, pacing. Humans never retreat without leaving a trail. They always explain, clarify, apologize. He stared at the display wall where a galaxy-wide news stream looped the footage of the executed peacekeeper. And Earth has issued no statement. Their representatives have left every council post, across 12 systems. Their embassies have closed, shuttered with automated locks. No contact since. He swiped the feed off the screen. Something felt wrong. And in that absence, fear crept in where arrogance had lived. Back in the heart of the Orpheus, deep in Translight. Drift between systems, Elise Morgan sat in silence inside a secure chamber. Not to rest, but to watch. 100 feeds lined the curved wall before her. Satellite views, news loops, system reports, intelligence projections. She was watching reactions. Faces, body language, scanning how the galaxy processed what had just happened. They expected us to rage, she said softly. Rafi Chen stood at her side, arms crossed, face unreadable. They wanted us to scream, protest, maybe even retaliate blindly. That would have been easy to contain, easy to control, predictable. But instead, he nodded toward the wall. Instead, she continued, we vanished. We gave them nothing. He shifted his weight. And that's worse? She met his eyes. That's terrifying. She tapped a control panel. Dozens of foreign newscasts rolled silently across the feeds, each of them speculating about Earth's silence. Analysts guessed at political schisms. Some suggested weakness, others preparation. One daring Zikati news anchor posed the question aloud. What if this is not Earth falling back, but Earth recentering something it hasn't used in generations? Elise gave a rare smile. She's close. At the edge of known space, inside a gas giant's storm-shrouded orbit, a ship stirred awake. The hull bore no flag. Its registration ping was classified under 16 outdated designations. Inside, its AI calculated an anomaly. A signal, compact, encrypted, had reached it through a quantum filament older than the Council itself. A signal with one embedded phrase, D-Black protocol confirmed. Hold position. Await directive. The ship didn't question. It waited. That was its design. But as it waited, plasma coils spun up. Hull plating shifted. Weapons, ancient and silent for decades, hummed like tuning forks in the dark. Humanity wasn't just silent, it was realigning. Back at the Council's central chamber, panic began to bleed in through cracks in the official narrative. The chair speaker of the Council, an Uri matron with 6 lifetimes of negotiations under her belt, convened an emergency, closed session. The footage, she rasped, is being seen as a declaration. One of the younger delegates, a luminous Drelly ambassador, blinked. But it was one man, one soldier. There was no official retaliation, no order of war. Exactly, she said. And that's what frightens the systems the most. Another voice joined in. Earth is behaving like the old powers. That phrase fell like a hammer. Old powers. Before the council's rise. Before treaties and charters. When species disappeared and stars were silenced in retribution, the room went quiet. The Uri matron lifted a data slate. 37 systems have sent in requests for Earth's reassurance. And did they get any? She set the slate down. They got silence. Far across the void, beyond the range of any patrol or probe, the moon of Solace, a covert human intelligence node disguised as an abandoned mining colony, activated its planetary scramblers. Inside, old agents stepped out of stasis. War analysts, ghost operatives, people the galaxy thought had died in peace. They hadn't died. They'd been waiting. Humanity hadn't announced war. It hadn't delivered ultimatums. It had simply vanished from the conversation. And as the galaxy tried to explain that silence, it realized Earth might not come back as a participant. It might come back as a force. The galaxy strained to hear a declaration of war. What it got instead was the sound of gears turning, of machines awakening, of forgotten doctrines returning to life. Beneath the ice crust of Europa, something ancient groaned awake. Once labeled as a defunct fusion research site, Facility Theta Black had never truly shut down. It had simply gone quiet, waiting, buried, beneath miles of reinforced alloy and cryogenic shielding. Now steam hissed through its tunnels, turbines began to spin, and lights flickered to life in order no longer taught to public engineering schools. A soft voice echoed in the corridors. Level 3 redundancy reboot confirmed. Accessing strategic vaults. Rows of cryochambers clicked open with perfect synchronization. Within them, sleeper personnel stirred, officers and analysts from a time when Earth still worried about planetary extinction-level retaliation, not diplomatic slights. Commander Saito's breath fogged as he stepped out, visor still de-icing. His first words were simple. "Who died?" The AI replied, "Diplomatic kill. One of ours. Live." No council response. Earth is quiet. Saito didn't speak again. He didn't need to. His expression, cold, sharp, already calculating, was enough. On Earth, beneath a warehouse in what the locals assumed was an obsolete transport hub, steel walls retracted to reveal a vast dome. Inside, monolithic black structures windowless humming with new energy. Project Backline, a secret so buried, only 5 civilians on the planet even knew it had ever existed. Dr. Halima Arendt, once labeled a conspiracy theorist by academic circles, now stood with her hand pressed against a biometric scanner last used 93 years ago. Identity confirmed. "Welcome back, Director." She didn't smile. Behind her, reinforced loaders began pulling tarp from what looked like vertical coffins. Except these weren't for bodies. They were for minds. Stored AI cores, banned from civilian use due to predictive behavioral instability. But now, Earth needed thinking machines that didn't ask for permission. In the Martian highlands, a windstorm howled outside the abandoned Bastion Delta installation. Inside, lights came on one by one in brutal red sequence. Dust rolled off, steel-plated training yards, bullet-scored walls, gutted tanks and battle drones forgotten since the last Martian war games nearly a century ago. An old, grizzled man with a missing eye stepped through the entrance, boots thudding on metal grates. He looked around at the ruined simulation zone. Then, he spoke as if to the dust. "Get the blood back in the soil." Overhead, a long dormant orbital array pinged to life and responded with a low-frequency tone. Humanity didn't gather its fleet. It didn't issue threats. Instead, it opened drawers the galaxy forgot it had. Project Black Root. Ghost relays. The Rook Doctrine. Orbital fail-state cannons. Names spoken only in classified briefings, in war rooms lit by amber lighting and reinforced paranoia. The galaxy called it overreaction. Humans called it protocol. And even then, it was only the beginning. Inside, a hidden complex beneath the Pacific Ocean, the air shimmered as a cold engine came online. The room was filled with a low hum like a storm in the distance, constant rising. A technician, barely 22 and freshly reassigned, stood in stunned silence. He'd been told this place was a training simulator, but that wasn't a simulator. At the center of the chamber, it was a core, massive, spherical, sealed in armor that bore the markings of pre-Council Earth. The warnings etched into the metal weren't in modern standard. They were in Old English, Latin, Cyrillic, Urdu, Chinese. Arabic, all translated to one message: do not activate unless humanity is no longer welcome. The lights turned green. Meanwhile, back in the Council's surveillance headquarters orbiting June Prime, a pair of intelligence officers sat in disbelief. We're seeing automated construction satellites activating in human sectors, the tall, Ithari analyst said, mandibles twitching. Construction for what? Her partner asked. The screen filled with wireframe models, ship hulls, atmospheric re-entry pods, drones, thousands of them. Some of the designs didn't match any known database. They're building something new. No, she said, narrowing her eyes. They're rebuilding something old, something they buried. Why? They haven't even said they're at war. The Ithari slowly tapped her claws on the console. That's because they're not going to say it. In the shadow of Saturn, a single word blinked in crimson on a forgotten naval command node. Activated. Earth had not declared war. Earth had simply begun removing the safeguards it once promised the galaxy. That was the sound the galaxy didn't know how to interpret. Not shouting, not fire, not rage, just quiet, relentless preparation, the kind that only comes before storms, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the stars remembered that humans don't bluff. The silence of Earth was deafening, but it was the silence inside the council chambers that terrified everyone more. High above the glittering capital of the Galactic conquered, in the floating spire of the Grand Assembly, a tremor of discomfort passed through beings who had ruled for millennia. Delegates from 100 species shifted nervously in their grav seats. Their voices, normally a constant flow of diplomacy, bickering, and policy, had died hours ago. The only sound came from the breathing of creatures with lungs and the subtle static hum of ambient translators. And then, in a gesture that would be remembered in every galactic archive, someone stood. It was Councillor Vereen of the Dalcora Dominion, slim, aquatic, barely 4 feet tall in full regalia, with bioluminescent threads running through her translucent skin. Her kind were known for their neutrality and long-winded speeches, but when she spoke, her voice was not long-winded. It was sharp. Where is the explanation for the assassination of Earth's representative? No one responded. She looked from delegate to delegate, Tarnak of the Varun Combine silent, Chizek of the Krar dynasty staring at his claws. Even the great Oritheks of the Imperial Scepter refused to meet her eyes. Was he not gunned down on this very floor? Vereen asked, her gills pulsing. And has Earth not, despite our insult, remained completely silent since? Silence. She slammed a webbed palm against the crystalline table, the sound echoing like thunder. That silence, she hissed, is more dangerous than any weapon. The footage had already leaked. The assassination was no longer a rumor. It had gone viral. Billions of beings across thousands of systems had watched the replay, the human ambassador standing calmly, hands behind his back, before being shot in, full view of the Galactic Council. No provocation, no trial, no apology, no protest. Just silence from Earth. Not denial, not retaliation. Just withdrawal. Councillor Vereen had tried to investigate. As per Council statute, she demanded access to the internal security logs. They had been wiped. She filed an ethics inquiry. The ethics board dissolved itself within 12 hours. She ordered an independent audit. The audit team disappeared en route. And that's when the whispers began. The kind of whispers that don't come from governments or officials, but from refugees, smugglers, and mercenaries. From mining outposts near the human border now strangely deserted. From AI trade networks reporting sudden silent blackouts in Earth's former diplomacy channels. One whisper, repeated in hushed tones. Earth hasn't spoken, because they've already decided. In the underdeck levels of the Council spire, buried in classified transmissions, Vereen found something that made her throat lock. A transmission, undated, unsigned, but authenticated by a long-dead code reserved only for humanity's top diplomatic echelon. A single line, with no subject. We are no longer explaining ourselves. 2 days later, protests erupted across the Trinek belt, where several merchant factions relied on human-engineered jump drives. The drives had gone dormant. No reason given. No error messages. They simply turned off. The protests turned violent. By the end of the day, when the Council convened emergency discussions, they expected Earth to petition or respond. They did not. Instead, a relay station deep in the Narcissus sector blinked to life and broadcast a single message across the diplomatic relay. The accord is broken. We are no longer bound by its terms. It wasn't even transmitted in Galactic Standard, it was in English. The translation was added manually, and suddenly, systems that once viewed Earth as distant, quirky, or irrelevant began to panic. Because everyone in the galaxy knew what Earth did when it no longer followed rules. It rewrote them. Vereen returned to the Council chamber the next day with trembling limbs and fire in her voice. I submit that we investigate the assassination immediately and transparently, she said. And I request that Earth be invited, no, begged, to sit with us again before they decide that isolation is their first act of war. Councillor Orithx finally looked up. His golden eyes narrowed. And if Earth refuses? Vereen's answer was slow, measured but deadly serious. Then I suggest we stop preparing for negotiation and begin preparing for consequences. At that moment, across unmonitored channels and abandoned diplomatic archives, the galaxy began to listen, not to Earth's words, but to the lack of them. The silence was spreading. Earth's embassies weren't broadcasting. Its military wasn't posturing. Its leaders weren't visible, and yet, worlds felt colder. Trade routes grew quieter. Stations near human borders began evacuating, not by order but by instinct. Something old was stirring, not vengeance, not madness, just precision. The kind of silence that only happens when a species that once tried diplomacy realizes it doesn't need to try anymore. It didn't begin with an invasion. There were no fleets, no demands, no threats. Just things started breaking, things that shouldn't. The Council's central AI core blinked 3 times before vanishing from existence. Not deactivating, vanishing. One moment it was routing star traffic for 27 core systems. The next, silence. No error logs. No access trails. By the time the backup protocol kicked in, 16 interstellar routes had already collapsed. Dozens of cruisers disappeared in mid-fold. Panic swept the Council's infrastructure like fire in a dry field. Still, no declaration. Still, no message from Earth. It wasn't a war. It was something worse. It was surgical. In the outer colonies of the Helios Run, a high-ranking military outpost belonging to the Krar dynasty detected a strange anomaly. Their sensor arrays began replaying their own data from a month ago on loop, showing no signs of change. At first, they believed it to be a glitch. Then they realized their real-time communications had also been looped, and then their power grid went dark, not exploded, not damaged, just gone, like the electrons themselves no longer listened. In the darkness, a single line of text blinked on every terminal. You deleted our ambassador. We deleted your certainty. Councillor Orithx stood before the Emergency War Committee. His voice was calm, but his crest feathers twitched, barely, but enough that the others noticed. This is psychological warfare, he declared. Humanity is attempting to rattle us. Councillor Vereen's reply was ice cold. No, Orithx. Rattling implies they're trying to provoke. This is consequence. There was no consensus, because no one could offer a counter. Every defense system, engineered with even partial human components, navigation, power routing, logic loops, was failing in patterns, not chaos. Not hacking. Precision. like a hand reaching into the heart of a civilization and pressing exactly the right nerves to make it fall to its knees. Across the stars, people began noticing the silence had become a shape. It had rhythm. When the Sarlon Bancor tried to freeze Earth's interstellar accounts, its financial AI collapsed in under 0.4 seconds. The AI's last log entry? Error 666. You do not understand who you're dealing with. The galaxy began to understand that silence was not a pause. It was a decision, a surgical mask worn by something that had operated for too long with courtesy and finally grew tired of asking for clean instruments. In orbit over the Council homeworld, 3 planetary defense platforms boasting 40 years of engineering and the most advanced shielding available imploded simultaneously. Not exploded. Imploded. Reverse energy compression. A trick theorized, never tested, except Earth had tested it. Silently. And now it worked. The platforms folded inward like dying stars, reduced to high-density slag drifting in geosynchronous shame. At last a signal came. Not from Earth, but from one human. It was routed through a decades-dead diplomatic channel. The message was short. A recorded voice. The same ambassador they had executed. His voice calm, measured. To the Council of Galactic Unity. We once believed respect was earned through diplomacy, dialogue, and understanding. You taught us otherwise. Pause. You killed an emissary who arrived with peace. Now we arrive without it. No threats, no raised voice. Just reality. The last act wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. The Council spire, the towering seat of all intergalactic law, shut down mid-session. Lights off, doors sealed, gravity suspended. Hundreds of delegates floated helplessly. In pitch black, their comms hijacked by a human signal. Only 3 words played. Politeness is over. When they emerged, hours later, they found every system catalog, diplomatic history, and legal framework involving Earth had been erased. Not by them. By Earth, and replaced with one entry, in every language, native and artificial. We're not here to rule, just to make sure you never forget why you don't try that again. In the centuries that followed, the Council rebuilt, tentatively. Earth never expanded. Never occupied, never bragged. They didn't need to. No civilization, no empire, no AI experiment, no genetically designed warrior caste would ever again make the mistake of seeing humanity's politeness as a weakness. Because everyone remembered the day it was turned off, and how after that day there was never a need to turn it back on.